We all know CICD. Why CICD reference came here, you will understand after the end of this lecture. So let's dig into the topic a bit more from AWS standpoint. So CICD stands for Continuous Integration and Continuous Delivery. It is a software development practice that aims to automate the process of building, testing, and deploying software changes. Here are some key steps that involved in implementing CI/CD in general. It varies from one organization to another. It varies from use cases to use cases, but general format everyone follows are below. So in CI/CD, at first, we need to have code repository, or we call it code source. Why it required? To store your application code in a code repository such as GitLab, Bitbucket, or GitHub. We will use in this tutorial GitHub as a code repository. Another important part of CI/CD is the build system, how you are building your code. We use a build system such as Make, Ant, or Gradle, Maven to automate the building process. The build system reads the source code, compiles it, runs tests, and packages the code into an executable or deployable format. It is also identified to install any dependencies required by applications such as libraries, frameworks, or plugins. These dependencies are often listed in the configuration file or in a build script. Like in Ant, you need to write the dependencies in build script. At last of the building process, it generates artifacts such as jar file or executable binary, or in case of Docker, images. These artifacts are then output of the build process, and they used to deploy the application. So this is most important one. Now the next part comes for the code testing purpose. So we use the testing and the verification of the software code performs as expected and meets the specific requirements. So it involves testing the functionality, performance, security, and usability of the code. Some general steps involved in testing code is kind of unit testing, integration testing, system testing, performance testing, security, usability, and regression testing. So everything is done. So we have our code in our repository, we build our code, we test our code. At last, if everything works well, we deploy our code into our staging platform, and we monitor the application, or we change for any change of usability from user standpoint, how it is behaving. If everything goes well in the staging, we deploy our code to production. So this is a general overview of how CI/CD works. And we have AWS CodePipeline, which already has all the steps involved. So now let's move on to AWS world and see how that works in that area. AWS Amazon Web Service provides a variety of tools and services to help developers implement CI/CD framework. Here are the couple of steps involved in setting up basic CI/CD pipeline on AWS. So we have our author. So either AWS IDE toolkits, or we can use Cloud9 to publish our changes. We have our source code, code repository, store our application code in a code repository. So AWS have the code repository integration with GitHub, Bitbucket, and also in AWS format called AWS CodeCommit. This is their proprietary services. After the source code is done, the next step is to build the code. So use a build tool such as AWS Code Build to compile, test, and package the code and in deployable artifacts. Code Build supports a popular building tool like Maven, Gradle, NPM, and it can easily be integrated with source code repositories like GitHub and AWS CodeCommit, etc. After the building is done, we need to test our code. Use a testing framework such as AWS Code Deploy or AWS Device Farm to automate the testing of your application. Code Deploy allows you to deploy and test your application on a variety of compute platforms such as EC2, Lambda, or on-premise services. Device Farm provides a cloud-based testing service for mobile and web application on real devices. Now the next part comes as the deploy. In deploy, we use an orchestration services such as AWS CodePipeline to automate the deployment of our application to production. CodePipeline provides a continuous delivery service, orchestrates the release of new changes to our application. It integrates with code commit, code build, code deploy, allowing us to create a fully automated CI/CD pipeline. Now the last part comes into picture as monitoring. We use a monitoring service such as AWS CloudWatch to monitor the performance of the application, identify any issue may rise. CloudWatch also provides a set of monitoring tools such as that can help you to track matrices, logs, events, alarms, and to notify about any anomalies that it had. Next, we can either use any of the tools such as AWS CDK or AWS SAM. If you are wondering about the CDK and SAM, please check my earlier tutorial about AWS CDK and AWS SAM. You will get a better idea about what is CDK, how to deploy, and what is SAM, how to deploy. In this tutorial, we will use AWS CDK to deploy infrastructure as code. To follow through this tutorial, we need to have some dependencies to be in place. Like, we need to have one AWS account. A free account will hold because we will use only AWS CodePipeline to deploy our infrastructure as code there. But please remember, if you have a free account, AWS CodePipeline only offers one particular free pipeline or active pipeline per month. What is active pipeline? That means any new code changes that has been done within last 30 days for that pipeline. So that is called an active pipeline, and it supports only one of them. So if you have another pipeline, if you have two of them, then then AWS will charge you for the second one, not the first one. So the first one will be free. So please remember this. So if you want to follow through this tutorial and create one new pipeline, please make sure if you want to be in a free trial, you are not crossing the limit of one active pipeline for each month. Okay. Next, we need to have Python installed in our machine. I have used Python 3.10. You can also install 3.9 maybe, but to follow through this video, please install Python 3.10 as a dependency. Next, we need to have you need to install AWS CDK CLI to follow through this video, and we need to have one IDE, whether it is IntelliJ IDE, Eclipse, or any kind of other IDE where you can do some infrastructure as coding. Then you are good. Then we are good to go with this tutorial. So that's all from this theory perspective. So let's move on and move to the practical one where we will create some code and deploy our resources with AWS CodePipeline. Welcome to the practical where we will be deploying AWS resources using AWS CodePipeline, and all will be doing from scratch. Our code is in GitHub repository. So we need to create one connection from GitHub to AWS CodePipeline to pull the code. And everything will be covered in this particular video. So the whole process of deploying our infrastructure with AWS CodePipeline has been divided into a couple of steps. So we will go through each and every steps in detail, and at the end of the video or at the end of the step, you will be able to deploy your AWS resources with CodePipeline. So let's go ahead and check the steps. So first, we need to create GitHub connection. So why this is needed is because, as I said, my code repository is in GitHub. So AWS doesn't know what GitHub is. So we have to create one connection from AWS to GitHub so that AWS can pull the code before deploying the resources. So for that, we need to create one connection in AWS Code Build. So we will go to AWS CodePipeline and create the connection now. So right now I am inside my AWS console, and we will go to AWS CodePipeline, and from here we will go to settings, connections. Everything currently I am doing in Frankfurt region. You can choose whatever region you prefer. So from connections, I don't see any connections right now, but we will create the connection. And as I said, my code is in GitHub, so I will choose GitHub, and the connection name I will give demo connection. So this is my connection name. Yeah, you can give any name, whatever you want. Then I will click connect to GitHub. So as I have already connected once GitHub, it will take my GitHub repository. This is my GitHub repository. If you have not connected any time in your GitHub in your code pipeline connection, what you can do is click on this install a new app. It will prompt you for giving the login ID and password for the GitHub, but I will not do that because I have already done that. So I will go back and I will choose from the drop down my repository. So if you click on this button, it will ask you for user ID and password, and it will automatically sign you in from GitHub credentials. So this is what I have already done. So I will choose this connection and just click on connect. And if everything works fine, my connection will be ready and the status will be available. If I go back to connections, I will be able to see that my demo connection is available and it is pointing to GitHub. And with this particular ARN, we will be able to use this connection. So remember, this is very important step to establish a connection between AWS CodePipeline and GitHub. Now let's go back to our keynote and check this out as this step is done. So I'm in my keynote. What I will do, I will copy it and I will paste it here. So this particular problem is solved. So my GitHub connection is there. Now what we will do, we will create an empty repository in our GitHub. So our code will be in GitHub. So we have to create an empty repository. So let's go back to our GitHub and create a repository. So to create a new repository, you need to go on top right and click on new repository on the plus sign beside, and then new repository. And when you click on new repository, you will come here. So this is my workspace, and under that I will create one repository called AWS maybe code pipeline. This is fine, and I don't need any description. I will make it a private repository right now. I don't need any README file. This one is also I don't need right now, and license I also don't need because we have to create an empty repository, otherwise CDK init will not work. I will just create the repository. So if my repository is created, you will be able to see this kind of screen where the cloning command will be given. So we need to clone this Git repository now to our local. So we go back to our keynote and check this out as well. Now inside my keynote, I will check this as also done. Now the next step is to clone the repository. So now let's go back to open our terminal and clone the repository. So I am inside my terminal, and on this particular folder, I will be cloning the repository. So for cloning Git repository, the command is git clone and then the repository. So this is the command for Git cloning my repository. Okay, the clone is done. It showed that you appear to have cloned a empty repository. Yes, this is what we want. Now we go back and check this out. So our cloning is done. Now the next part is to remove unwanted file from the repository. But as we can see, and right now I'm inside of it, and I will check if there are any files. So there are no files right now. So this is an empty repository. So this step is also done. The next step is to do CDK init. So we go back to our terminal and do CDK init. So to do CDK init, we have this command CDK init. I need one application where the language will be Python. So as I said, we will be using Python in this tutorial, and I will press enter. Okay, our application initialization is done. This has created one empty application where we have one kind of SQS queue which is commented out, and this initialization is done, and the initialization done is in Python. What we will do is we will create the virtual environment for this right now. So we have this virtual environment command already there. We will copy this and we will paste it. So if you guys are wondering like what is virtual environment and how to do this CDK init, so please go through my earlier tutorial of AWS CDK and how to deploy stuffs or initialize a project and what is AWS CDK. You will understand why we are creating this virtual environment. Now we will go ahead and activate this virtual environment. So my virtual environment is activated, and I will clear the screen. As we can see, my virtual environment is activated now, and what we will go ahead and we will check this out as well in our keynote. So CDK init is done. Now install dependencies. So before installing dependencies, I want to show you the repository that I have initialized. We will be opening up within this PyCharm. You can open this repository with any ID, whatever you want. We will be using PyCharm. So let us go ahead and open this repository with PyCharm. So this is my repository. I have opened this repository using PyCharm. Whenever you will open this repository, you will be able to see the virtual environment that we have created and the README file. So in the README file, you will be able to see the creation of virtual environment, how it is done and activating it, and how to install the dependencies. So this is an empty project, or I would not say empty project. It's kind of a demo project, how to install everything. Like how to install the how to create one empty CDK project, and this has, let me show you, only one stack, and that stack also has only one queue, but it is commented out. So if you deploy this particular stack, nothing will happen, only CDK metadata will be created. Now please check that we did not yet install the dependencies. So this is why this particular things are coming up, that this is not satisfied. So it does not know what AWS CDK is, it does not know what constructs is. So if you remember the README file, that we have to install the dependencies here, pip install -r requirements.txt, this we have to do. And if you see the requirements.txt, it already have this AWS CDK library and constructs. So what we will do is we will copy this one and we will go to terminal and paste it and install the dependencies. So as we have done, this installing of dependency is done. Let us go back to our PyCharm and see if all the errors are gone now. So we can see we are inside our PyCharm and we see that all the errors are gone, because now we have installed all the dependencies and all the dependencies are installed in our virtual environment. So we are good to go. We can create the stacks now and the resources. So let's go back to our keynote and check this out as well, that we have installed the dependency now. Now the next part, most important part, is to add the resources. So by adding resources, I mean we need to deploy a couple of AWS resources, maybe one SQS queue and one lambda. So we will be adding the resources, and also we will be creating the pipeline. This is what I meant by add stack pipeline. So we will be creating the resources and we will be creating the stack pipeline. What I'm going to do, I will write down the code and then I will explain it to you what I have done. So our code is ready. What we have done, let me explain you step by step. So there are two steps. Basically, we have created resource stack. That resource stack means whatever the resource we will be deploying, maybe it is a SQS queue, maybe it is a lambda, maybe S3 bucket. The stack is a different stack, and the pipeline stack, the one that will be deploying the resources, is a different stack. That is the application stack. So these are two classes. So inside, so let's go to the resource stack first, that is this one. So in the resource stack, we can see that we have one queue. The queue name is demo queue. We have one function. The function name is CodePipeline lambda. We are also creating one bucket. The bucket name is demo bucket. This huge name. Okay, so this resource stack is different in our pipeline stack. So in this particular resource stack, we have import. Now let's go back to our pipeline stack. That is our actual infrastructure. So this is our infrastructure, and in this particular infrastructure, we have imported the resource stack, and this resource stack will be deployed with a stack name called resource stack deploy. And the environment is similar to the one where the pipeline will be deploying. This is cool, right? Now the pipeline stack. In below, you will be able to see the pipeline stack, where this class is responsible for pipeline stack. And this particular stack, what it does, it actually pulls the code from Git input, from GitHub. This is my repository, nspacer AWS CodePipeline. So if we go back to our repository, we see that this is our repository. From here, it will pull the code, and it will pull the code from the branch main. And which connection it will use? It will use the connection that we have created earlier. This one, this is the connection string that it will use. After it proves the connection, after the connection is fine, it will create the code pipeline. For the code pipeline to be created, it needs one pipeline name, that is this name, and very important is that the cross account key. The cross account key is the one which is needed if you want to deploy your resources across other accounts. Let's suppose your pipeline is in account A and you want to deploy your resources in account B, then you need to create this cross account keys. Otherwise, if your pipeline and resources are in same account, you don't need those keys. Remember, these cross account keys are not free. So if you create cross account keys, it will cost you some money. So it's better if you do it in the same account, you always set it to false. Otherwise, you will incur some costs. So I did not know that. So that's why initially I did not give anything, and default it took true. So I had to give some money to AWS. So remember, if you are doing this pipeline and resources in the same account, you don't need this cross account key. So make it false. Okay, next, the synth step. So the synth step I will come later. So let's talk about the code pipeline first. So in the pipeline itself, we have seen that we are creating the pipeline. Fine, but which pipeline it will create? What are the properties of the pipeline? So the pipeline will be created by AWS CodePipeline, and where the stages will be self mutation is true. That means if there are any code changes, it will automatically mute it, or it will self mutate the pipeline again, and it will deploy. And the code pipeline, it is taking the input that we have created. This pipeline, it is taking the input, and the step is synth step. Now comes the synthesize step, that what it does. In the synth step, there are a couple of steps involved, like the installing the commands and the dependencies. So the ID is synth. Whenever this one will be called, the required dependencies will be installed, and then the CDK synth will be given. Like if we are deploying our stack with CDK, it will do CDK synth first, and it will create one CloudFormation stack. And which and how it will do it, it will take the git input, the code from git input it will take, and it will install the dependencies, and it will give then the CDK synth command. And after giving the CDK synth command, the CloudFormation's template will be created. Okay, now our synthesize is ready. Our code is check out from here. Our code build is done here. Now self mutation is also on. That means whenever there will be a new deployment, it will automatically mutate the pipeline. And now the deployment part. Now the deployment wave is actually divided into two steps, where it will prepare the stuffs and then it will deploy the resources. So what it will deploy? It will deploy here. If you see the deploy stage, it is taking this particular class, and it will deploy this particular resources in this stack, and it will create the stack name called resource stack deploy. And where it will deploy in this particular account and in this region. So this is how the code pipeline works. So we have to create one input, and we have to give the input to our pipeline, and at last, after building the code, we have to give the deployment stages, and it will deploy our resources to the pipeline. And if we go back to our resource stack, what resources we will be deploying? We will be deploying one queue, function, and bucket. And the function will be taking this code from this demo lambda that I have created. It is nothing, just returning on 200. Now comes the main part, where resides the app.py. In the app.py, we have to mention the stack name, the pipeline stack name, where it will create the where it will initialize the pipeline, and the pipeline will be named as GitHub code pipeline stack. So in turn, the dependency is that this app will be creating the pipeline, and this pipeline will be creating these resources. So this is the concept. And we are also tagging this application, like whatever it is. I have given the key name as feature, resource tag, and then the contact as whatever it is, and then the team is the best name. Why not? So this is how everything is done. So now let's go back to our keynote and check what have we done. So we have added the resources. We have also added the stack pipeline. Now the next step is to configure AWS credentials, because first of all, if you are doing with CDK, we have to deploy the resources first. The first time the pipeline will fail because it will not find anything in the GitHub repository. Then after that, we will be pushing the code and then it will run again. So how we will do it? Let's do it one by one. So let's first configure the AWS credentials. So I already had a user, and for that particular user, I have created this access key and secret key. So let's configure this AWS access key and secret key in our terminal now. So I have configured my AWS credentials with the one that I have generated. This is the access key and this is the secret key, and I will be doing all my research in Frankfurt region. So I did not change the region. Now let's go back to Keynote and check this out. Now it's time to do the real work, okay, we have already done the real work, but not the main purpose of this video is to deploy the resources, right? So we have to deploy the resources. Now we will be doing CDK synth. Okay, let's go back to our terminal and do CDK synth in our repository. So we are inside our repository and let's do CDK synth. My CDK synth is done, and I can see that it created a nice huge CloudFormation template. It will create a code build project, and it will create AWS CodePipeline as well. And within that pipeline, we will be able to see what it will do. Like it will synthesize the project, and then it will deploy the resources like this. This will install the dependencies, and then it will do CDK synth for our resources, and then with CodePipeline it will deploy. So that's all good. What we will do is we will go back to our Keynote, and let's first clear the screen, and then we will go back to our Keynote and check this out. CDK synth is done. Now what we have to do, we have to do CDK bootstrap and then CDK deploy. So we go back to our terminal and do CDK bootstrap. So if you're still wondering what is CDK bootstrap or what is CDK deploy or how the init is working, please refer to my CDK tutorial to get more knowledge about AWS CDK. You will find that very helpful. Now my bootstrapping is done, and this will deploy everything in this particular account and region. So we go back to our Keynote. Now let's do CDK deploy. So the command for deploy is CDK deploy, and I don't want to approve, so I will give required approval never and enter. So my CDK deployment is done, and now let's go back to our console and check out what has been done. So I'm inside my console and go to CodePipeline, and we see that one new pipeline is deployed, and the name of the pipeline is new pipeline, and right now it failed. We don't need to bother about it, but the pipeline is deployed. Let's go to CloudFormation and check. Okay, in CloudFormation we see that GitHub CodePipeline stack is deployed, and this is the one where the pipeline will be created. And if we go to resources in flat view, we can see that CDK metadata is created, code build project is created, IAM policy is created, bucket policy is created, and this is where our code pipeline, AWS code pipeline, also created. So everything is good. So our infrastructure, our pipeline stack is created. Why the resource stack is not created? Because the pipeline failed. So why the pipeline failed? Let's go back to pipeline and check why it failed. Now, if we see that no branch name main found for the full repository name in spacer AWS code pipeline. Why? Because in our repository, if we go back, there are no code, nothing at all, because we did not push anything. This is why the pipeline failed. So whenever it tried to pull the code from this GitHub repository, it says, hey, I did not find anything, so I will fail. So it will fail. Nothing to worry. Now the next step. So before that, what we have to do? Yes, we have to check our Keynote. Our bootstrapping and deployment is done. Now let's push the code to Git. And as soon as we will be pushing the code, let's see what happens. Okay, let's push the code to Git. So to push the code, you need to add every file there, you need to commit the file, and you need, let's clear the screen again, and you need to push it. Okay, our git push is done, and let's see if in our repository it is showing or not. So I am inside my repository, and if I refresh this one, I see that it already pushed my code. And if I go back to pipeline, we see that the pipeline triggered automatically because we have our code now in our repository. So the source execution is succeeded, and the next execution is done, is build. So while it is building, let's check it out. What are the stages it created? So first of all, the source from where it will take the code. Then the build, where it is coming from the synth, which will install the dependencies and do CDK synth. Then it will update the pipeline where the self mutate is coming on. If there are any code changes, it will automatically update the pipeline. And then the assets. And after everything is done, it will deploy that. And as you remember, I have said that deploy stage divided into two parts, where it will be preparing the resources and then deploy. So it will prepare all the resources, and as per the deployment region, if you mention couple of more regions, like not only Frankfurt region, maybe Ireland region or US region or India region, it will deploy one by one to all those regions. So this is what we have created. And if you remember from our stacks that we have created in our pipeline stack, we have created everything in this pipeline, where this is the source, this is the building part, like the synth step. This is the mutation part, where we are giving the self mutation is true, and at last this is the deployment web. This is the deployment part. So this is how AWS CodePipeline, you can create AWS CodePipeline with CDK, and you can deploy your resources using AWS CodePipeline. So we will wait for some time now and let the pipeline finish, and let's see what happens and what it deploy. Okay, I can see my deployment is successful. So all the steps are kind of went fine, where it took the code from GitHub, then it built the code, then update the pipeline, update the assets, and then deploy. If we go inside of this one, you will be able to see that one new code build project has been created, and inside that code build project, we can see the build log, where we have given the install the requirements.txt, and then we have given the CDK synth command, and everything is there. So this is what it did, and then it created the artifact. Then it must have created the artifacts, and it put in the repository there, upload the artifacts there. Then if we go back to pipeline again, and if we see that update pipeline, this will also will take you to the code build project inside of it. And then so it created the command with AWS CDK, and it deployed the resources. So this is the pre-build, the pre-deployment part. And then if you go back to code pipeline again, and in the asset section, if you also click on the details, you will be able to see what happened inside of it. So this is the asset that it has created. So we had a couple of assets that needs to be deployed. So so it has created the assets, and then on the deploy stage, it prepared all the resources that it needs to be deployed. So this is the stacks that it needs to be it deployed actually. So it will deploy one queue, one lambda function, and for that one any kind of role lambda function, and the one S3 bucket. And after that is done, it will deploy the resources into the account. So in this particular thing now, if you remember from earlier CloudFormation stack set, this particular stack was not there. Now we can see that this stack is created, and inside this stack, if we go inside the resources, we will be able to see that one SQS queue is created, lambda is created, and S3 bucket is created. So this is how we do it. This is how in AWS code build or code pipeline you build with AWS CDK and deploy the resources. Now we go back to our keynote and check this out as well. As soon as we push the code to Git, it automatically triggered the pipeline and it deployed all the resources. Now let's go check it out, the resources that it actually deployed or not. So go back to our management console and we go here to the lambda maybe. And if we go to lambda, see that this particular lambda is created. So this is from our code pipeline and it has nothing but printing a 200. Now let's go to S3 and check that if our bucket is created. We see our bucket is created. These are all the artifacts bucket, other artifacts bucket that I have created earlier, and maybe this one on February 20th. This one is the new one where we have created this GitHub artifact bucket. This is from this project, and if we go inside of this bucket, there is nothing. Now if we go to SQS, and inside SQS we have to go to queue, and there our demo queue is created. We see that how AWS CDK is used, AWS code build project and pipeline to deploy our AWS resources, and we have also separated the resource stack from the pipeline stack. So this is much more granular control that you will have while if you do any kind of testing as well. This is very much important, and this is very easy way to do it for granular control. Always separate your pipeline stack from your resource stack. So this is all. Now let's go back to our keynote and check like what is pending. We have done everything. Now the last thing is pending is destroy the resources. So we go back to our terminal. So as everything is deployed now, what we will do is we will destroy all the resources that we have created. So if we type in CDK destroy, what it will destroy is it will destroy this pipeline. It will destroy the code build project that it has created related to the pipeline. So let's go check it out and let's see what happens if we type in CDK destroy. So we can give here -- force that we don't need to provide the approval. Now let's give enter. So now we can see that destroy command is completed. Now let's go back to our management console and check it out what it has deployed. Please remember that as we are giving this CDK destroy command from our console, so it will only destroy the pipeline and the stack pipeline, not the resources. So we have to destroy the resources stack by our own. So this is very much important. If you by somehow deleted the pipeline itself with your CDK command, but if you are still in use in your production, all the resources are still in use, then it will not be destroyed doing it in your from your local. So let's go back to our management console and check it out. So if we go back to pipeline, no pipeline is there. If we go back to projects, no project is there. But if we go back to our stack set, we see the resource stack is still there and all the resources like SQS queue, lambda, and S3 bucket is still there. So our resources is there, but the pipeline is destroyed. But if you also want to destroy all the resources, I think we should do that. So we just click on delete the resources because we don't need the pipeline. We don't need all the resources right now, so we can delete this stack as well. So we can see the deletion is in progress, and we will be able to see that all deletion is completed in a couple of minutes. So we see that all resources has been deleted. Our SQS key or lambda is deleted, and S3 bucket deletion is skipped because I think I did not give the command for deletion in the CDK, so that's why it skipped. But anyway, we see that our resource stack deletion is completed, so it will be gone now. And okay, so this is how you destroy your resources after creation from CDK, and this is how you deploy your resources or your pipeline from CDK using GitHub as a source repository. Now we go back to our keynote and check this out as well, that the destroy resources is completed as well. Or what I can do is I can just drag it here, and that's it. Now one step is not written here. I'm not sure how you will do it. Maybe with a role deployment would be a good idea rather than taking the user credentials directly. So what we can do is, for security reasons, you need to go back to your AWS Management Console and to IAM. And from that user, we have created this access key. Better to deactivate and delete the access key, because this is we can create later, of course, but right now it will not be needed. If it is not needed, please delete it. So I will be deleting this access key now, and my access key is deleted. So this is very much important, otherwise it may happen that it may get leaked. Then you will be in big trouble. You have to pay a huge amount of bill that something you have not used. So please keep remember it. So at last, I wanted to say that I hope this video was informative for you, and you gathered the knowledge about how you can deploy your AWS CDK resources using AWS CodePipeline and code build project. This is very easy. If you want to do that, so you can also use AWS code commit for as a repository, but we have used GitHub, so this is also very easy for do it. So as my channel is very new, please like, share and subscribe this YouTube channel for more updates. I will be seeing you in my next video with a new tutorial. I will be giving all the description related to this video in the description box. Also, if you want the code, let me know in the comment section. I will make the repository as publicly available, so that you can clone the repository and take the code. And please give your comments and thoughts. What do you think of this video, and how do you like it? How can I change the video to make it more accepted by you guys? So please like, share and subscribe to my YouTube channel. Till my next video, bye bye, take care and see you.